Welcome to the Create Your Happy podcast, where conscious female creators come together with a shared vision to inspire and empower women as they learn how to fully embrace their humanness, find their unique voice, and collaborate on how together we can change the world. I'm your host, Christy Holt, happiness coach and conscious funpreneur on a mission to change the world one beautiful soul at a time. All right, gorgeous, it's time to get curious and become inspired. It's time to create your happy. Welcome to the show. I am so pumped to have you here today. I have Penny Phoenix with us today, and Penny is an anti-capitalist business strategist who's super passionate about helping entrepreneurs and businesses to create strategies that actually work for them in a way that feels really good too. So welcome to the show, Penny. I'm super excited to have this conversation. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about your background story, the things that you've overcome and the things that have led you to being where you are today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Christy. I'm so excited to be here. And yeah, we have had this conversation a couple of times. I'm, mildly passionate about it.
Yeah.
But a little bit about me. I started my business about 3 years ago after a stint in working in accounting. And prior to that, I worked as a swim instructor, teaching babies how to swim. And so my background isn't the standard, like I went to college and then I entered corporate and then I learned all of corporate to be able to bring all of these theoretical ideas in. No, I'm just a nerd who read a ton of books. And as somebody who was an employee and I feel like a lot of people are going to resonate with this, could see a lot of the holes that the CEOs were missing. As someone who was boots on the ground, often it's easier to see the spaces in between the leaves. And it's something that I got more and more passionate about. When I started my business, I was like, I'm going to help people build ethical businesses. I'm going to help them reinvigorate their people and get their teams going well. And what ensued was a total deconstruction of my worldview and recognizing how capitalism itself has infiltrated not just our work life, but every aspect of our life, and how we can take back our energy, take back our happiness and our joy, and then create businesses and strategies that actually feel good to us and get us excited about the work that we're doing.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, I know that capitalism has come up on the show a number of times, and it's a whole topic on its own. So I'm really excited that we have the space to kind of dive into that. And as we've talked about a lot of times before, this system is working exactly as it was designed to work. And that is part of the problem, I guess, if you will, in that it is in fact functioning exactly the way that it was intended to. And it is maintaining the other systems that are affected by it. So why don't you share a little bit about your thoughts on capitalism, which I know you have lots of really strong thoughts, while we sort of dive into this area, just to get our listeners thinking about looking at new perspectives, maybe that they haven't before. Let's have a little conversation around this.
So if you research capitalism and you look for a definition, the internet, whether you go to like Google, Wikipedia, dictionary, whatever, it's basically going to tell you that it's an economic system that's based on private ownership of the means of production and their operation for profit. And what that actually means is the owner of the business cares the most about money. The way that capitalism operates, that has to be your primary value. Otherwise, your business will not be successful by capitalist standards. And we see this a lot of times when we're looking at like people sharing record profits for shareholders. And there's this sort of unrealistic expectation that there has to be explosive growth always. There's never a contraction in capitalism. There's never sort of a downfall unless it's a catastrophe. It's always expected to be expanding. It's always expected to be getting exponentially more and more and more. And what that means is that we are also exponentially exploiting more and more and more. And as entrepreneurs in the space, especially the ones that I work with who are usually a little bit offbeat, a little bit like different, that doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
You get into this space, you start learning about sales, you start learning about marketing, and there's all this interesting psychology, and you start like trying to follow in the footsteps of people who have come before you, and you very quickly realize like, whoa, that does not align with my values.
Yeah. And it just doesn't feel very good, right? And so then you're questioning, well, what's wrong with this picture? Is it me? Right? That's the first kind of go to, be like, oh, what the fuck is wrong with me that these systems that, clearly appear to be working well for everyone else either don't feel good and or don't work.
Well, and in my first business, a lot of the students that I had were people who were in coaching businesses. And if you're anywhere in the coaching industry or even adjacent to it, you'll notice that a lot of the messaging seems very, very similar. And a lot of the instructions are very similar. Like most of my clients come to me after they've spent thousands of dollars trying coach after coach after coach after coach. And it seems like they all have the magical ticket to success. And they have all these beautiful testimonials that show how great they are and all of these ways that they're using, sales psychology to get you in. But once you get in, it's like, it's sort of like walking into that show, The Good Place, where they finally get into heaven and they're like, this is the good place. Why the fuck does it suck?
Yeah. Like, I'm confused.
And it's just a lot of times I see a lot of people who have taken those failures onto themselves and said like, well, it's because I can't be consistent enough, or it's because I'm not paying enough attention to detail, or I'm not, there's something wrong with me or with my business or with my messaging
or with my mindset
or my mind. Oh my God, the stupid mindset thing.
And now as someone who is very passionate about mindset, I can still see here where there's a lot of this beating ourselves up over not having it perfected. And it's a whole perfection loop coming in that we are feeling not good enough and we're not having the right mindsets. Well, we can change those. So, we've got to just back away slowly.
I find that most of, and this isn't everybody, there are some mindset coaches that are absolutely amazing and can help you like step out of the negative self-talk and really start moving forward. What I found, however, in my own journey is that a lot of the mindset coaching is really around gaslighting you into taking responsibility for things that you have no control over. So a lot of coaches like to keep that distance. You're responsible for your results, not me. If you don't do it, then you just didn't do it right. And there's also, very little acknowledgement of social economic privilege, support privilege, racism that exists. Like these algorithms that we're all dealing with and posting on are inherently racist because they were built by racist people. And to not acknowledge that and to pretend as though somebody who has these disadvantages can post the same thing and get the same success is completely asinine.
Yeah.
But we're gaslit into believing that it's your mindset. And if you just tried hard enough or wanted it enough, then, these things would work for you. And sort of taking a step back and like seeing that pattern across my clients is something that helped me to create what as my 4 energy profiles when it comes to entrepreneurs. And what that helped me do was really start breaking down the different ways that people work and start looking at the strategies that are commonly suggested and going, oh my God, this is why this isn't working for this person, and creating something different that does.
And really within that, there is this whole level that is necessary to tackle, which is the definition of what you think happiness is, what success is, what abundance is. You're defining that. And now if you're letting someone else or the world or the capitalist system or other people, your teachers, your parents, your family to define that for you, you're likely going to come into some incongruences because
someone else's definition is not necessarily going to be the same as yours. So getting clear on how you're defining those things is a really important first step in order to be able to move towards having those things, right?
Yep. And there's this idea that like, and I think I always love to see those posts where it's like, what did you think rich was when you were growing up? And we have this idea that everybody sees it the same way that we do. But for some people, it's having, a basketball hoop. For other people, it's having a Porsche. For some people, it's, does your fridge deliver ice and water on demand? Yeah. And like, there's just these different things that make us feel good about ourselves, that make us feel, and it also doesn't have to be in a materialistic way. Right. A lot of my clients, like, we go through this phase of, I want these things, I want this money, I want to be able to do that. And then once you get those things, you kind of go, okay, I have them, but I'm still not happy. What's going on here? And you discover other things like, I want time. I want space to be by myself, or space to be with my kids. I want energy. Like, running a business can be exhausting. Yeah. And, having time to build friendships outside of having to do the work that you're doing, that's a luxury too. And the way that I try to frame the strategies is, instead of defining those things as a luxury, which capitalism has done, because capitalism commodifies everything, right, including human rights. And instead of saying like, okay, well, according to capitalism, having a house is a luxury, having water or electricity is a luxury that can be taken away, I try to look at these strategies and go, what is it that you actually want? How do you want to have it? And let's build a strategy that gets you there, and fuck Jeff Bezos and the rest of it. Who cares?
Yeah, ultimately, shifting that definition is really important because, first of all, we'd be working towards what we don't want, thinking it's what we do want, but because everyone is so unique. And I think what happens is we wear the masks, we take on the beliefs, we take in the learnings and the understandings from the world, and we forget who we are and what we want. So we end up working towards these things that we don't actually want. What we do want is safety and freedom and space and love and peace and connection, right? All of these things that actually we can give to ourselves, which is an amazing gift in itself. But we often get tricked into thinking that it's out there, that if we go and do the things and we accumulate the things, that we will have those things that we want. But that's not how that works, because the more that we accumulate in this capitalist system, the more we accumulate, the more at risk we are of losing it, which first of all keeps us in a space of fear and scarcity and worry and stress, which doesn't allow us to expand. It actually keeps us sort of stuck in our comfort zone of the familiar. But redefining it allows us to create more of the experiences that we really are truly after. Because, in my experience, most people say, oh, I want to lose 20 pounds. It's not actually about the weight. It's about the experiences that better health would allow them to have, right? Maybe it would allow them to be better able to play with their children. It will be allowing them to improve a health condition that they have, or remove it even. But instead of focusing on what society expects, i.e. to lose the 20 pounds, we can shift into thinking about what the experience we truly want to create is. And I think that's kind of what your goal is here as well, with working with entrepreneurs in an anti-capitalist strategy, because we can't focus on the problems and we can't focus on what the world wants, because that is set up and running the way it is meant to. But we can break out of that mold in a number of different ways and start creating new solutions that are outside the box and more in alignment with what we know in our heart and our soul to be, right for us.
Yes. And one of the things that I've really identified as really the solution to 99% of this, like the desire for safety, the desire for experience, capitalism creates an individualistic stance. And in America, where I am, it's even more like hyper individualism. And you see this lack of sharing of resources where it becomes extremely excessive. to the point where it's almost laughable. Like, there is really no reason that every single house on a single block needs a lawnmower. There's really no reason that we have to duplicate all of these items that we own and hoard them all ourselves, except to fill the profits of somebody else.
Yeah.
And so when we're creating our businesses and we're creating the strategies that we're using to gain clients, the strategies that we use to build teams, you know, a lot of companies fell into that sort of like, oh, we're a family thing. The problem with that is in America, a lot of family is very toxic because we are hyper individualistic. And I think that the emphasis that we should be going into is an emphasis on community. How do we share resources? How do we share energy? How do we share time? How do we share our knowledge and our brilliance? And how do we create these safety networks that catch each other when one of us falls? Because the thing is, you're right. Like, it doesn't matter how successful you are in capitalism, you can lose it at any time. And there is no social network, at least in America, that is going to catch you. You can be a millionaire, get cancer, and be homeless in 3 years. You can, like, have a simple accident and wipe out your life savings. And they do this, and by they I mean like capitalism in and of itself as a system does this to keep you participating. Because if you are not afraid and you feel safe and comfortable, you're no longer going to chase profit. You're going to chase experience. You're going to chase art. Like, there's this I saw this study that talked about how a lot of people who tend to be the starving artist types are the grown children of generationally wealthy families. And a lot of people like looked at that and said, see, like, these white kids, these rich white kids, they're just lazy. They just don't want to do it. And I actually think it points to a very different idea of, like, if we were given the time and the space and had our human rights met, we would move towards art and innovation.
Yeah.
We would look at the world in different ways and how we could put it together, and we would do things that inspire us. Humans are not a lazy race. We are not a lazy society. We want to help each other. We want to contribute. But we've created this system where if I get mine, you don't get yours. And now we're in competition for these same resources that we're pretending are scarce when they're not.
It's not pie, people. It's not pie. There is more than enough available for everyone. And this is the thing that really gets me, is that the select few that are really benefiting from this system, the ones that are at the top, they have so much. And yet this fear of losing it has them protecting and hoarding what they have rather than sharing with other people. And ultimately, the truth is, if those millionaires and billionaires of the world wanted to, they could solve all of the world's problems. They could solve water shortages, food shortages, home availability for the homeless. So many of the problems could be solved. Yet they're off buying their 86th yacht. Or sending a dick rocket into space, which, don't get me wrong, sure, space exploration is interesting and fascinating, and I don't know the roots of where that's going, but I suspect it's not to take the people who are less than to live somewhere else. It's really just to serve their own purposes. So anyways, tangent. But
we're so good at this.
We're really good at tangents. But the capitalist system is working the way that it's meant to, and the people at the top are extremely fearful of it collapsing. And even the people that are in the middle or at the bottom have been taught to fear
capitalism collapsing.
This idea of it collapsing, because it's, well, frankly, our minds are a bit of an asshole and are working, in fact, to keep us quote unquote safe. But the definition of safe in our brain is not necessarily synonymous with what's good or what's best for us or what's good or best for our experience. It is all about what is familiar. That's it. So keeping us safe, quote unquote safe, is really just about keeping us in the familiar and not having to face significant change, because that is scary in our brain. Holy fuck, I'm going to die, and shuts that stuff down, right? So we've really got to push here into the uncomfortable topics and ask the questions and consider different perspectives if we are going to have any possibility of shifting the way that things work. And the systems that are in place are working so fucking well because the people that set them up actually have also created a whole several generations of human beings that simply show up and do what they're told without asking too many questions.
But it's because we have a lack of community. And
Yeah.
and this specifically comes into white culture, right? A lot of times, like, especially if you look into activist spaces, you'll see a lot of BIPOC people telling white women that they don't know how to organize, they don't know how to listen, they don't know how to be a part of a community, and we only know how to call each other out in really toxic ways. We don't know how to call each other in. And that's drilled into us from birth. We have been effectively separated into these individualistic silos where we no longer know how to trust other people and know that they have our back.
We don't trust ourselves either. So
no, we're not allowed to trust anybody except
Yeah.
for capitalism and these ideas that we were given of, like, the American dream of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and, working hard. And the reality is, from a resource standpoint, they thought that our work weeks were going to go down to 15 to 20 hours a week. The 40-hour work week is to keep the populace too tired and exhausted to be able to participate effectively in our governance, to be able to effectively communicate and create community. If you're getting up, going to work, picking up your kid, making dinner, and then falling into bed exhausted at the end of the day, you don't have time to go protest and think you barely have time to read the news. And that's done on purpose. And so when we're looking at, like, we've been looking at this as a like macro view. If we want to zoom in on the micro view of, if you're an entrepreneur and you're wanting to create something different and wanting to do something, the way that you do something different is you shift your values. You look at what makes you happy. You look at what makes you feel connected and safe and good, and not from a place of, like, I'm staving off this fear because I have the thing that's going to protect me, but in an expansive way, not a freedom to make the decision, but a freedom from, in a collective protective way. And that's by doing things like consensual sales, marketing that treats people like humans and not like numbers, management that cares about the well-being of the team members.
Yeah.
I always think it's so funny seeing all of these companies, wringing their hands. How do we get millennials and Gen Z to stay? They're just, leaving us willy-nilly. Really?
I think it's interesting because the older generations paint the younger generations as lazy or as having somewhat sort of ADHD type tendencies, where they will go into something and then decide, nope, not a fit, and they'll get out. And so the older generations, because this is the train of thought they want us to be on, is that you just do it. You're not here to be happy. You're not here to have what you want. You're here to support the machine, right? And this is, you're told, is what's so great about all of it. And in fact, the younger generations are just like, nah, fam, that doesn't feel good. And instead of beating them up and saying, oh my gosh, they're just lazy and they don't have focus and they don't have the same interests, we need to be looking to the younger generations to really utilize their curiosity, to really utilize these perspectives that they have that are very different from the norm. And the education system is really designed in such a way that we are largely taught one perspective of information that serves, right? B, told not to really ask questions. Don't get too curious because, facts are facts. So We don't want anybody to be questioning why and how this is working this way, because God forbid, we might actually see a better way that would make someone maybe wrong, quote unquote. It's not about that at all. It's really about growing and expansion. And that comes out of being wrong.
Well,
But
if you think about it, the public school system, like capitalism, is functioning exactly the way that
yes,
it was meant to. I think it was Rockefeller who, I want to say it was Rockefeller. I might be wrong. Please don't quote me on that. But I think it was Rockefeller who basically started it. And he said, I'm not looking to create generations of innovators. I'm looking to create generations of workers.
yeah,
What do workers do? They sit down, they shut up, they regurgitate whatever it is that you fed them, and they work.
yep. Without the
Their
questions, right?
public
There's,
school is not designed to help you think critically.
yeah,
And I feel like most of my friends who have like ultimately gone into entrepreneurship did so because they were brilliant innovators,
yeah,
because they were the kind of people who couldn't help but question the system, but see the sky through the trees and say, why aren't we doing it this way? Why aren't we figuring this out? Why aren't we doing this more efficiently? Because the answer is, it's not actually about these companies being efficient. It's not even about maximizing profit for them. It's about making sure that the system stays intact. And that requires that we do things in a way that exhausts the populace, not in a way that is efficient. And what that means is for you as an individual, you get to fuck shit up and make it efficient.
yeah,
You get to change the world by doing your business and dealing with your clients in a different way. I read this book. I've forgotten the title of it. I'll have to give you the title of it. But this woman is a feminist icon. She's amazing. And she talked about how life exists in fractals. You know, if you look at a broccoli and it looks like a tree trunk with,
yep,
little leaves, and then you break off a piece of that broccoli and it's a little tree trunk with little leaves, and then you break off a piece of that tree trunk with little leaves,
yeah,
all the way on down, right? That's a fractal. That means like the design of the tiny translates to the design of the large.
yeah,
And the way that we can change society is by changing the design of our tiny,
yeah,
by creating our little bitty business that cares about consent, that cares about ethics, that cares about the environment, and creating community, finding other little tiny pieces and depending on those and coming together with them as a structure and supporting each other so that when one of us falls, the other ones catch them. And by creating that network within your business, by creating that network within your personal life, you'll feel that sense of safety that your nervous system is craving.
yeah,
And when you create that sense of safety, that's when you start to be able to come up into your innovative brain. That's when you begin to escape fight or flight.
yeah,
And it's so important to let yourself be different.
yeah,
Like I really feel like I remember there being this sort of phase where everybody was like, ooh, being weird is cool. And we turned the nerd thing around and we turned all these other like expectations of like you have to be this one type of way. And I feel like Gen Z has done an astounding job of this.
yeah,
And Gen Alpha is just fully feral. And the more comfortable you are with different pieces and different versions of you and not looking to the safety of what
yeah,
everybody else is doing and instead creating that safety within yourself and your own community, that's what's going to give you the juice and the energy and the ability to actually chase those dreams. Because one of the other things that you and I've talked about a little bit is those 4 energy types, right?
yeah,
And I'm going to briefly go over them just so your listeners know what I'm talking about. There's 4. There's one that's the action taker, and this person has a very high, very consistent energy. This is Tony Robbins types, the ones who are like, holy crap, how do you have this much? And it's because they're goal oriented. Like, these are the people who set a goal. They don't care how they're going to get there. And that can cause a little bit of questionable ethical, like, do the means justify the ends kind of thing, or ends justify the means. But they're very, very consistent and very, very high energy.
Yeah.
Then you have the analysts, who are also dead consistent. I call these people the Energizer bunnies. They're not going very fast. They're just sort of like plodding along, like little turtle in the hair race. But they are dead consistent. They want to know all of the details. Once they have the map of all of the details and they understand how everything fits together, they're just going to take the next step on down the line and keep going. 99% of all business advice and all corporate work advice applies to those 2 groups. If
right,
you
those are the types we have been more or less conditioned
to become.
So
either be focused on goals or be focused on details. Those are your allowed parts.
Yeah.
What we have on the other half are nurturers and spontaneous people. Nurturers are people who, if you were to graph their energy, it would look like a really pretty, like, soft sine wave. It's got highs and it's got lows, but there's a cycle to it, and it's a relatively predictable pattern. It may not be perfect, but you kind of generally, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, you kind of know, I'm going to have more energy here and I'm going to have a low period here. And it creates a predictability that allows you to sort of plan for those different times.
Yeah.
But these people are more connected and more interested in relationships.
Yeah.
They care about other people. They're very empathetic, and they are more interested in making sure that the person that they're learning from or working for or being with is somebody that they feel connected to. They're much lower risk takers, and they're much less likely to just jump into things. These are the people that read testimonials if they're on a sales page, and they're just very connected people. And then you have the spontaneous entrepreneurs, and these people are chaos. If you were to graph their energy, it would probably look like a giant scribble without any discernible pattern. They work in really, really high highs where they can do more in 8 hours than somebody else could do in a month. But then they also work in corresponding low lows where they are waiting for inspiration, where everything is just sort of percolating in their mind and they're waiting for things to grab them and pull them back into that high. And the thing is, spontaneous people get gaslit their entire life by being told, if you could just stay up here this whole time, if you could just be consistent, you would be incredible. You would be 5 times the employee, 5 times the CEO of anybody else. But the reality is that's not how their energy works. And so they often will end up feeling this shame every time they hit a low of like, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough at the details in order to be in this low all the time. I'm not good enough at consistency to be in that high all the time. So I just suck. And what you find in somebody who is an employee like that is sort of a broken up bunny hop from job to job to job to job to job. Because what happens is they enter the job, they're really excited about it, they're learning all this new stuff. And so they're doing amazing, amazing, amazing. They're guaranteeing you, because they're showing this off right at the front, this is what I'm going to be like as an employee. This is the bar that I'm setting for myself. And inevitably,
we fall short.
At a low.
Yeah.
There's going to come a low. And when that low comes, their boss is like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Why aren't you actually doing, like, we set the bar here, you're so low down here. Why aren't you consistent in producing the way that you were before? Oftentimes, like, either they will like swing back into a high and then they will be labeled the inconsistent employee who is occasionally a superstar, but never gets the raise and never gets the promotion because they can't be counted on, or they'll get fired or they'll leave. and find another job and be amazing and then slow down and then be amazing and then slow down. And recognizing, like, if you're in one of those two groups, there's nothing wrong with you.
Right.
You just don't fit in the consistency model of action takers and analysts. And as managers, you want somebody as a manager who is a nurturer. You want somebody who is running a short-term project who is spontaneous, because they're going to get that shit fucking done. They're going to notice the changes in the team. They're going to be able to grease the wheels in a way that brings everybody together. But we're so focused on these two types, action takers and analysts, being the right way to be, that they're the ones that get pushed up into management. Yeah. And then everybody's really surprised when their entire team hates them and bails.
Right. And I think that the big piece of this too that drives many people to entrepreneurship is that we don't fit inside that box. We don't fit inside that mold. We're not meshing with some of those more highly consistent, high level, balls to the wall, hustle and grind sort of culture. And we recognize in ourselves that that's not a good fit for us. So we gently move away, only to be told again, and to feel like our worth is still in question, even though we have moved away from that for good reason. Mm-hmm. We have gone into entrepreneurship, and yet we're still being told, you're not doing this the right way. Right? Because that's the conditioning that's coming through. And now I'm curious what you think about, even within these 4 archetypes, is some of it just how much you're allowing yourself to just be yourself, to be who you are without that conditioning? Like there's a bit of a spectrum there, right? From all in on the capitalist regime and fully functioning at the ideal cog in that wheel, versus fuck that, I'm over here doing my own thing, functioning in a way that works for me. And there's sort of a spectrum of in between. So I'm curious if you also see any sort of correlation to that, increased awareness, that deconditioning or that releasing of the masks and the conditioning that we might have had, and how that plays into how we see ourselves, right? Because our perception is created by our thoughts, and our awareness, our belief about ourselves creates that awareness. So, giving ourselves that permission and detaching too at the same time our worth and our value from that need to measure up to that standard, so that we recognize how incredibly fucking valuable and how very worthy we are, not because we're doing, but because we exist, and because we're here to create whatever experience we desire that has nothing to do with any of those other outside things.
So yeah, there is totally a spectrum. And a lot of times I'll get people telling me, like, there's one they really strongly align with, and then one that is sort of secondary, where they're like, oh, I also am this. Like for me, I'm very, very strongly in the spontaneous camp. And I'm also a nurturer. I love connecting with people. I also occasionally will go into analyst mode. Action taker mode is not really my thing, because I don't love the high consistent energy. I can play with details for a minute, but there's space within these 4 archetypes that you can find yourself in each of them and find your strengths and your weaknesses. But I think that you touched on an important topic of how much permission we're giving ourselves to be ourselves.
Yeah.
That comes from safety. How safe is it for you to be yourself? It's a conscious choice.
Right.
And it's not as much as I would love to tell you that you can choose to feel safe and then choose to be yourself, the reality is this society is not inherently safe for people who are different. It is not inherently safe for Black people, for Indigenous people, for gay people, for trans people. It is not safe for people who practice a religion other than Christianity, particularly in America. Yeah. In other countries, it's a little different. But from where I'm standing, it's not safe to be those things in certain places.
Right.
And to come on here and be like, oh, guys, you just have to feel safe and just love yourself the way you are. Yes. And it's valid for you to acknowledge that you can love the fact of who you are and love the fact that you have this different kind of energy and you have these different beliefs and these different ideas, and also recognize that it may not be safe for you to fully be that yet. And it's maybe not as easy as everybody says to just wander off and go do it. Not everybody can move. Not everybody has the privilege of somebody to support them while they start their business. And those are things that have to be addressed as you're starting your business and as you're creating your strategy and as you're taking steps to create your little fractal that will help change the fabric of society. So yes and no, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, we've talked about this safety and how sometimes it's just not that fucking easy to create this safety. And while, yes, we are super powerful and have the ability to consciously create in our lives whatever it is that we truly want, we do have sometimes these barriers, sometimes these obstacles. And what is the solution to addressing these barriers and these obstacles with the greatest amount of ease? Well, it comes back to that community again, doesn't it? Because how can we move forward when we don't ourselves yet possess all of the tools to create safety for ourselves? Well, we can look to other people. And to me, collaboration is an amazing gift because the world has definitely told us all of the ways in which we have fallen short. That is drilled in. We all know exactly where we are falling short in the world in trying to measure up, trying to make other people happy, trying to fit into other people's definitions of happiness, success, abundance, whatever it looks like. But the truth is that we have both gifts that are perfect for what we need to do, and we have what we would perceive as weaknesses. They're not always the obstacle that we have labeled them as. So if we detach ourselves from the label and the stories and the identity that we've often put around them, we can recognize them as a clue, as information, as to where maybe we can get creative and innovative and overcome and create a new solution, because, you know, we're not the only ones ever out there that are dealing with some sort of perceived weakness. Often there's a ton of people who resonate with that. And when we give ourselves permission to be okay with those weaknesses, and in fact, even look beyond and look for what the gift in that weakness is, we can then begin to leverage that, because we can use that to help other people, right? We can use that to grow a team of people to collaborate and come together. And, you know, this is one of the reasons I love having all of these conversations, because that in itself is a creative solution to a lot of what feels like a big problem in business, is because we're beating ourselves up for the things that we're not measuring up on, instead of looking for the creative solutions to leverage those things instead. And how crucial collaboration can be in order to come together to create something that is bigger than ourselves, right? That is innovative and creative and outside of the current limits, I guess, to the current structure, that can take us beyond that and coming up with new ideas, innovative ones that look completely different.
So collaboration to me is just a part of how I run my business. Like the strategy work that I do is generally consulting. And I am a collaborative consultant. I don't come in with all the answers. I come in with all the questions and we answer them together. Yeah. And I think that structure takes away that hierarchy, and it takes away that need to impress for both parties, and allows us to just be curious and be wrong and to make mistakes and to learn from those mistakes. And it gives us permission to stumble upon different ideas that we may not have had if we were still holding up those masks of the perfect business, the perfect client, the perfect consultant, you know, all striving for that profit.
Yeah.
And I think that if you're struggling in your business and you're struggling to like get your stuff going, if you're struggling to move forward in a way, collaboration is a way to reach other audiences. It's a way to mix ideas. It's a way to sort of like sharpen the knife in order to figure out where it is you want to go and what it is that you want to do and build that community.
Yeah.
You don't have to agree with everything somebody else says or does in order to be in community with that person. You don't have to agree with, you don't have to be a clone of somebody in order to work with them. And in fact, if you work with somebody who's not like you, if I'm a spontaneous entrepreneur and I have these big bursts of energy and I can create the map that we're looking for, that we're going to build, and you're an analyst who is careful and detailed and consistent, that's a magical combination of getting shit done.
Yeah.
And I think that this idea of like, I love being a solopreneur. I love working for myself. And that doesn't mean that collaboration can't happen. And it doesn't mean that I'm truly alone in any of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't have to be the individual sticks, even if we're doing our own individual thing.
And I think together, when we come together with other people who are on a similar mission, it doesn't have to be the same, but we can really lift each other up and encourage each other. We can remind each other of our amazing missions, and we can help each other to see different perspectives, reframe those ideas that we may be holding on to. Because let's be honest, even coaches need coaches and therapists need therapists, because we often can't see what is right fucking in front of our face for what it is, because it is so familiar and so comfortable that our brain is just like, yeah, nope, this is it. This is the way it is. Just going to keep filtering all the information that aligns with that. But sometimes an outside perspective can help us to lift that veil, to take the blinders off, to help us see so much more than what our brain is showing us, because frankly, we can't see it all. And often we limit ourselves by what we are thinking and perceiving and creating because it feels safe to do so. So creating the space of collaboration with other people really helps us to clear away the gunk, see more clearly, and also to come up with just better ideas, because more perspectives, more curiosity, more interesting outside the box thinking is going to give us better results, right? And that's why we stepped into this whole world of entrepreneurialism in the first place, to create impact, to create results, to do things differently than the norm.
Yeah. And I like what you said about creating that safety to see other ideas, because our brain, there is actually a system in our brain that is a filter for all of the information that tells us what to pay attention to and when to pay attention and why to pay attention to it. You'll notice this phenomenon if you ever, buy yourself a red car and then suddenly red cars are everywhere. And when you work in collaboration with somebody, it can help sort of like tear down those blinders to the things that your brain has decided is not important to you. And it's just another way, like having more people looking at a problem means that you have more information about that problem available to you, because your brain is working overtime to make sure that your worldview does not get rocked, that the information that comes in already fits neatly with what you already know and believe, and it's not going to change anything. So having somebody else come in and point something out to you, especially if it's somebody that you trust and respect, that's going to be able to expand your inner worldview and allow your brain to take some of those filters away so you can see things a little bit differently.
And I know some of you out there are thinking, but I like to be right all the time. And it's not really about the being right or being wrong, but just being open to different perceptions and perspectives really can help you to just keep looking at your beliefs, your position with a little bit greater curiosity. Because listen, if we are not changing, if we're not discovering that we were wrong before, we cannot continue to grow. Being wrong, making mistakes, and quote unquote failing, which I don't actually think is even really a thing. I think that mistakes and failure are just information. They are just feedback about things that we have done that we can use to move forward. And it doesn't have to be some painful process to be wrong. And listen, to be right doesn't mean you need to make someone else wrong either. You can both sometimes be right too. So holding space for a wide variety of perspectives and ideas gives you that space in which to be more curious, more open to changing and growing and learning and evolving, because that's what life is all about. It's about this opportunity to continually take in new experiences.
Well, and for those of you who are going, well, I like to be right. Where did you get your ideas?
Yeah.
What framework are you using to decide what is right and is wrong? Where did you get that? Was it innate? Was it drilled into you through your religion? Was it drilled into you through like the experiences that you had? Where are you getting that? Why is it that way? Start
It's
to
a
question.
survival
It is a survival thing.
response.
But the survival response is to learn it and imprint it from other people who surround us, because we are biologically designed to be pack animals. We are not lone animals that wander off by ourselves. And if we get kicked out of the group, then we're no longer safe. And so subconsciously, our brain is like, we got to stick with the group. We got to agree with the group. And so that resistance that you're feeling to changing your ideas is your brain saying, no, we got to stay with the group. And this is what we've learned will keep us safe.
Yeah.
So
again, it's operating out of fear. And now if we can shift from operating out of fear and worry about our safety, we can move into a space of operating out of love, which is expansive and feels good, and it benefits the many, because we touched on this earlier, but we are not a bunch of separate individuals living in this world. We are all connected. We are all made of the same energy, right? Us, nature, everything that exists in the universe is made up of the same format of energy. It's just arranging itself in different patterns. We're connected. And so what we give to others, in effect, we give back to ourselves. And so this is where things are really falling apart, I think, is that we are scared to give to others because we feel it takes away from us, when that's actually not the truth at all. What we give freely comes back to us, maybe not from the same source, but we will get that back, and it will be magnified when we can give freely. So instead of being fearful and holding back and with keeping it within ourselves because we're afraid to give it up, the solution is actually giving it away, giving what we can to others, and then receiving it back, because we are all connected.
100%. I agree.
So I would love for you to share a little bit about what you're working on, any offers that you have, the type of clients that you are looking to work with, and where we can find you most easily online.
Okay, so my favorite clients are entrepreneurs and business owners who want to do things differently, who want to do things in an ethical way, and who want to do things in a way that feels good for them. Those four archetypes I talked about before, 99% of my clients land in the nurturer and the spontaneous land. If you are an analyst or you are an action taker, I'm still down to take you on. I just tend to work better with the people that have less consistent energy, and helping them break out into really owning who they are and owning the ways they want to be in business. I do strategy and consulting work. You can hire me for a day, a month, or 6 months. And if you're interested in talking, come find me on Facebook at Penny Phoenix, or at my website, www.pennyphoenix.com. Penny is spelled like the coin. Phoenix is spelled like the city. And what I'm really working on right now is expanding this business, expanding these ideas into more spaces. I've done a lot of one-to-one work, and I love one-to-one work.
Yeah.
And now I'm sort of taking these ideas that I've garnered as an entrepreneur and aiming my sights at corporate and going, how can we create a better experience for more people? How can we create a community that sets standards in a way that supports everybody and creates these social safety networks? And so if you're somebody that's got ideas or wants to collaborate, I would love to hear from you, because I am interested in doing some really cool stuff.
And I think ultimately, the more we step into the things that light us up and make us really come alive, and the things that we're really passionate about, the more we become ourselves, because that space feels very, very natural to us to operate in. And once we kind of strip away the fears that have kept us from being in that space, we can really, really enjoy ourselves living up in creating those experiences inside that space. And when we do that, and when we're living this amazing life, we can't help but shine that around and inspire other people that they can have the same thing for themselves. It's like a big permission slip. The more you are authentically you, and the more you authentically operate in ways that feel good and right and correct for you, the more you give others the permission to do the same, the permission to show up and love themselves, to accept themselves, to own their flaws and their fuck ups and their failures, and reframe them into something that's actually a good thing, that's just part of their journey of growth and evolution throughout their life. And to take that and create impact using their voice, right? That's ultimately what this is all about. And that's like collaboration on the grand scale, because one person alone feels often like they can't do very much. But now when we start to come together and collaborate, connect with other people, that's when the volume on the voices increases, right? And we can really start to impact significant change. I'd love for you to share one last idea here, a tool or idea that the listeners can use, like to implement practically into their life today in order to create more happiness, either inside their life, their relationship, or their business, or all three. Because as you know, and I know you and I are both coaches for the whole ass human. So we know that those pieces are all inextricably connected, but whichever direction you feel led to share on today would be great.
So one tool that I love to give all of my clients is really like, when life is coming at you hard and you have that fear and you're thinking those thoughts, one of my favorite things to do is to ask myself, is this true? And who benefits from me believing this?
Yeah.
Because when I look at my thoughts from that perspective, I find that a lot of times I'm believing things that aren't true, or my belief in that is directly benefiting somebody else
At the cost to you.
Often, I don't
right?
necessarily, exactly, like I maybe necessarily don't want to do. And so if you get that feeling in your gut where you're just like, oh, this doesn't feel good, ask yourself, like, who's benefiting from this? Yeah. And is this really true?
Yeah. And sometimes even just figuring out the origin of those thoughts, where it came from, can help you to identify that and really reframe it into something that actually is true, and something that does support and serve you, creating more of those experiences, creating more happiness, more joy, more peace, more abundance in your life. And ultimately, that's what we're here to do. We're here to create our happy.
Exactly. I love it. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. It's been a wonderful conversation. Not the last, I have no doubt.
Thank you so much for listening to today's show. I trust you were inspired to take back your power and create your happy. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share the show with women in your life who could use a little extra inspiration today. If you'd like to connect with myself and or today's guest, you can find those details in the show notes. We would love to hear from you. If you've got an inspiring story to share, you can also apply to be a guest on the show at createyourhappy.ca. As always, get out there, have fun, be you, and create your happy.